Welcome back to Inside City Hall. The City Council passed landmark legislation yesterday that will allow non-citizens to vote in local elections, a longtime goal of immigrants' rights advocates. While the measure was approved overwhelmingly, it did face vocal opposition from some council members and is almost certain to face legal challenges. My next guest is one of the council members who voted against the measure. Councilmember Joe Borelli represents parts of the South Shore of Staten Island. He's also the minority leader of the council as the head of the Republican conference there. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Errol. Thank you.
Yeah, and congratulations on Minority Leader. Non-citizen voting. What is the harm in allowing green card holders to vote? My first instinct is that if they're real New Yorkers, 80% of them aren't going to vote anyway.
All right, the statistics would certainly bear that out, that so few will end up voting considering the last election turnout. But the primary problem with this is that this is 100% illegal. I know your viewers have their state pocket constitutions in their closet, so if they want to pull it out, they can check out Article 2 of the state constitution, which says every citizen has the right of suffrage in New York State. That was voted on by a referendum of the people in New York State in 1938, and it was re-referenda voted on 5 times since then. Moreover, Section 5-102 of the state's election law reads, "No person shall be qualified to register for and vote in any election unless he is a citizen of the United States." So the biggest problem with this is that we have done something that the City Council does not have the authority to do. There has been legislation in Albany a number of times over the years to change this. And if this is the case where it passed in the state legislature and it went to the public for a referenda, there's nothing I can do or anyone else can do. That's how you can change the state constitution and state law. That's not what the advocates did. The advocates did an end around in the face of the Corporation Council, in the face of the mayor, in the face of our chief democracy officer, all of whom agree that this is not legal to do. That's really the problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, my understanding of it is to the extent that there might be a legal dispute there, it would surround whether or not saying whether somebody is a citizen of the state of New York is different from whether or not they can vote in a locality like New York City. And I'm reminded that we used to allow non-citizens to vote for the old community school boards. I mean, those boards had a lot of problems, but too much influence by non-citizens was never one of them.
No, so the difference there is that the education law actually allowed for votes on the school boards of citizens of the state of New York, whereas in election law, which governs all the elections in the cities, towns, counties, and villages, it requires, Section 5-102, requires that people be citizens of the United States. I mean, this is why it was so clear. I don't think Bill de Blasio has much of an ideological opposition to this, as some might think. I think he genuinely relied on the advice of his counsel and was opposed to this measure because it is illegal. Ultimately, the courts are going to decide whether or not this pans out. But it's my belief, and really, if you read the statutes just as they are, without even looking for smoke and mirrors and things like that, it's clear that voting is limited in this state to citizens.
Okay, so obviously there will be a challenge, and we'll see how that all plays out. Let me ask you about the race for City Council Speaker. Have you spoken to the various candidates who want to be the next Speaker of the Council, and do you have a preference?
Well, look, I mean, there's no white smoke yet, so this is certainly an ongoing thing. I'm glad to be able to stand here and say that I do have a good relationship with most of these members who are all, bona fide progressive Democrats. And my conference will play a role in picking the next Speaker of the City Council. We have as many votes, as much right to vote as well as any other block of voters in the City Council. So we're going to play a role. We're excited to play a role, and we're excited to have the next 4 years to maybe disagree on a whole bunch of things. But if we can build a confident coalition to elect someone who has really the true success of New York at their heart, then I'm happy to lend my support and give a push.
Well, in addition to I think there are 4 Republican members of the council, as well as a couple who. But there are a couple who have run on multiple party lines. I'm thinking of like Kalman Yeager and Bob Holden and so forth. You start putting it together, it starts to look like at least for purposes of any given vote, like the vote for Speaker, it's actually kind of a sizable block.
Yeah, I think going forward, the common sense caucus, as Bob Holden and I like to call it, will be comprised of at least 10, maybe 11 members who really are, genuinely moderate people of both parties who want to see public safety return to New York. We want to see a tax system that understands that people can't afford to live here at some point. And we want to push back on some of the radical policies that didn't have exactly the best consequences for New York. That's what the group that we're a part of is going to stand for, and that's what we're going to do for the next 4 years.
I saw a number, I moderated a number of debates, and there were a lot of people who were attacked, some of your fellow council members, for working with the progressive majority that controlled the last council and will control the next council. How do you personally navigate that?
Look, again, I've always been privileged to get along well with my members and my colleagues and friends. So it's a stick and carrot approach. At some point, my conference and we have to be there to call out what we think is fundamentally wrong. But there's a lot of times where we can help shift the balance of different legislation, different votes, different committee votes, and we're going to continue doing that. The council is not going to get any more conservative because there's a lot of us. The council is not going to become a conservative body. It's always going to be one of the most progressive legislatures in the city, in the country, and we're just there to try to offer a counterpoint to a lot of the things that go on that we don't agree with.
Speaking of what you don't agree with, what do you make of the governor's new policy, which will require indoor establishments to require vaccination or require masking?
Look, I'm frankly getting sick and tired of it, Errol. We have the vaccine. It's widely available. People should get it. I encourage it. We have effective treatments. We have the death rate that's far lower than anywhere we've been in the last 18 months. And we should be proud of the direction we've gone in. We should be proud that we've been so successful in eradicating deaths related to COVID. And it's unfortunate that we're going back to mandates, going back to this knee-jerk reaction. If the death rate is so low and we're not going to go back on these mandates now, then it really does beg the question of will we ever get back to some new version of normal, or will masking be part of our lives in perpetuity? Will the vaccine mandates be in our lives in perpetuity? If not now, then when?
Well, I looked this up, and, of the top 10 zip codes as far as infection rates for COVID, 7 of the top 10 and all of the top 5 are in Staten Island. In fact, the top 2 are in your district, I think, 10309 and 10307. What's going on there? Or is it the new normal? Do you think we don't need any more sort of pressure mandates and strategies to try and drive the rate down?
No, there are certain things we can do. Most importantly is encouraging people to speak to their primary physician. When it comes to vaccines, I think the conversation should start with people's primary care physician. That said, Errol, we can play this game all the time. If you had me on this show 6 months ago, it would have been 10 different zip codes that have the highest effective rates. We know this is going to peak and ebb and flow in different neighborhoods. It's going to happen. This virus will be with us forever, but that plays to my point of if things are going well in terms of our death rate, if the hospitals are not being overloaded in New York City, why are we doing this knee-jerk reaction where we're just always, again, pushing to the mandates, pushing to the restrictions, pushing to shut things down?
Yeah, I'm not a scientist, but I think the way we get these scary new variants is that as long as it's out there percolating, it will also mutate. And what you don't want is for the next mutation to be seriously deadly or even more transmissible, right? There was, at least initially, there was talk about how do we really sort of put this thing in a bottle and put it in the same category as smallpox and measles and rubella and things that we as a civilization have fought and sort of gotten completely under control.
And here's where I totally agree with you. But the fact that Omicron has not panned out to be that, and yet we are doing those same knee-jerk reactions, putting back mandates, going stricter on our mandates on vaccination within New York City, when all the fluff about Omicron has proven to be false. I don't even know if we've had a death yet in the United States from Omicron. And I just read that op-ed written by the South African doctor who sort of discovered the virus that was in the Daily Mail a couple of days ago. These are the things that did not pan out in this specific instance, and yet here we are, knee-jerk reaction, pushing for stronger and stronger restrictions and mandates.
Okay. Well, it's going to be quite an interesting conversation about this and many other topics after the new year when the new council is sworn in. Again, congratulations, happy holidays, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Errol.
All right. We're going to talk more about the race for city council speaker and a lot more when I'm joined by 2 top journalists in our